Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome. It is a pleasure for Sarah to have you all here today. We are a US-based company, and through the years, we have been remarkably successful not only there, but also in Europe and Asia. Our team of operational leaders works on our clients' behalf, taking a pragmatic and collaborative approach, working with key members of our clients' staff to ensure that regardless of the starting point, we leave behind a team that will thrive. We are expanding our operations in Mexico, and that is why we are ready to listen and learn from our top 4 profile panelists extremely valuable insights on how to apply leadership tools to successfully navigate the uncertain times that we are living. They will address not only the COVID-19 health issue that we are facing, but also we'll talk about the USMCA just entering the framework and how to do business in these times. And also they will be talking about actionable leadership regarding financial and operational tactics for the challenges ahead. Some information that it is important for you to know before we start with our webinar today. We will remember that all of the time you will be able to submit questions and answers using the Q&A function. Okay, so we will be then later on taking our questions for the panelists to be addressed. Okay, so let's get started. And the first speaker today is Mr. Eduardo Solis. Eduardo, he was the former president of the Mexican Association of the Automotive Industry, and he is a very experienced professional focused on investment promotion, industrial development, and free trade agreements negotiations. He participated in the negotiation for the original NAFTA and was instrumental and lead negotiator representing Mexico for the new USMCA and several other free trade agreement discussions with several Latin American countries. For more than a decade, Eduardo was the executive president of AMIA, as said before, and during his time, Mexico auto industry grew almost 66% in production and almost 190% in export value. Since February this year, 2020, Eduardo is working as international consultant specialized in foreign trade, supply chain development, policies for industrial development, and investment promotion. And Eduardo this morning will be talking about two very important topics to us. Number one, the state of the Mexico auto manufacturing, how the COVID-19 health issue is been changing the way of doing business here in Mexico, how companies are restarting operations in this framework, and secondly, he will be touching base on the new USMCA free trade agreement and how that will be impacting year over year the way of doing business, not only in Mexico, but also in the North America region. So Eduardo, thank you very much for accepting our invitation today, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Hector, for this introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here in this Seraph webinar. And Franco, could you please put on the screen my presentation? Franco? Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, let me first start giving you a picture of where is Mexico in the auto industry. For Mexico, the auto industry is the top generator of foreign reserves. It has created a tremendous surplus last year, a record high $89 billion. For Mexico, this industry is so important, but also to the world. We are the sixth largest producer of autos in the world, the first in Latin America, but also it is important to note that we are the fourth largest exporter in the world. So Mexico is quite a player, a tremendous player in this industry. And of course, within our economy is very important because today it contributes with almost a third of total exports that Mexico sends out to the world. Our autos from Mexico land in more than 100 countries, but it's important to note that at least 70% of that is directed to the United States. And if you add to that Canada, it's almost 80 to 85% of our total exports. So North America is very important. Next, please. Our production exports grew quite nicely coming out of the 2009 crisis, as you can see it. But you can also see the pandemic of COVID-19. The last figures that you see there are May, and you can see that because of the fact that during the months of April and May, our industry was closed, and because of that, you can see the tremendous drop in our production and in our exports. Production fell 94%. Really, it fell 100% almost. A lot of our production is from companies that started and reopened in the third week of May, but many of the companies were not able to start production in this reopening, but until the 1st of June. Even last 1st of July, a couple of European companies started production this late. So next, please. You can see that COVID-19 is, of course, an issue. But let me first give you a picture of where's Mexico in North America. You can see that before the NAFTA, Mexico contributed with 7% of total production in North America. Canada contributed with 15%, and the United States contributed with 78%. This is the picture the year before the NAFTA. Last year, Mexico grew its total share of production from 7% to 23%. You can see that Mexico has gained an important share of total North American production. Canada went to 12%, and the United States to 65%. North America contributes with close to 18% of the world's auto production. Next, please. I will spend some time explaining a good example of integration in North America, and this is when we manufacture a piston. We start with raw aluminum to manufacture a piston. This raw aluminum is shipped from Michigan to Ontario. Ontario produced a piston casting, and it gets also pre-machined before it is sent back to Michigan. In Michigan, it gets additional machining, and the piston is sent to Mexico, where the piston is finished and is sent to Wisconsin, where it gets assembled with rods and rings. The assembled piston is sent to an engine plant in Michigan, and after a final assembly into an engine in Michigan, the piston gets inside an engine that travels to Ontario to a vehicle assembly plant. You can see how many crossings of the border the piston gets in North America. It travels around US, Mexico, and Canada many times. This is a very good example of how North America is integrated. And this is something that we show the US administration when negotiating the USMCA, of the importance that it has for the auto industry in the three countries, this free trade. Of course, the NAFTA was key for this, and we needed to convey the importance of having a trade agreement right after the NAFTA. Remember that at some point we were told that we may not have a trade agreement. The Trump's administration threatened that we may not have a trade agreement, but at the end we got the USMCA that I will be talking about later in my presentation. Let me stop right here, because I think it's important to note that because of the closing of the plants in the three countries during the months of April and May and late March, by the way, it was very important that the three countries synchronized their reopening of the plants coming out of this tremendous pandemic of COVID-19. We needed to synchronize the reopening. The pandemic is still here. We do have a lot of cases in Mexico, but also the United States. In some states, they do have a problem. But since our sector is signaled as an essential sector, we can still operate during this pandemic. But I can tell you that the reopening has been slow. In some states in Mexico, like the state of Chihuahua, we still have a 50% limit in production because of the pandemic. And we expect that during the following weeks, we can go over this 50% of production limit. The pandemic has also brought an effect in our demand for new vehicles in North America. We expect that on a yearly data, the United States will drop its demand by at least 25%. Likewise, in Mexico, we will have a drop in demand for new vehicles yearly data 2020 of almost 25% also. So the coming back of the companies will not be to the levels pre-pandemic. In other words, we're not going back to the numbers we saw in 2019. We expect this drop of 25% to affect everyone, and we must take that into account. My guess is that we're not going to see 2019 numbers, but maybe by the end of 2022 or even 23. That's what I wanted to convey to you regarding the state of the Mexico auto manufacturing. And if I may, Hector, I will go on to topic number 2, which has to do with the USMCA and how it will impact the supply base. Franco, could you please go on? Well, first of all, it is important to note, and this is quite interesting, that because of the NAFTA, now the USMCA, the three countries are quite integrated. We can see it in the trade of vehicles that take place within our region. If we talk about imports of vehicles from the world into the United States, Mexico and Canada account for almost 52% of total imports of vehicles into the US. Half of this is Mexico, half of this is Canada, with Mexico slightly over Canada exports to the US. In the case of exports of the US, Mexico and Canada account for 48% of total exports of the US to the world. Most of these to Canada and a smaller part to Mexico. Please, next. Well, as I said, July 1st marks the first day of the entry into force of the USMCA. It replaces the 26-year-old NAFTA. NAFTA was quite a success for the North America auto industry. If you ask me, I've been asked in different times, if we were able to keep the NAFTA, we would have preferred to keep the NAFTA. We changed to the USMCA because the US pressed its counterparts of Canada and Mexico to change the NAFTA specifically in the rule of origin. The US administration aim was to make the rule of origin more stringent, was to make a rule of origin tougher than we had in the NAFTA, and the NAFTA was replaced this last July 1st of 2020 with this new rule of origin. Next, Franco, please. Well, I don't want to bore you with all of the details, but let me tell you that the rule of origin in the USMCA was quite affected of the NAFTA was quite affected by the USMCA. The NAFTA had a very simple rule of 62.5% of regional content net cost, and it grew to the USMCA, it grew to 75% in 3 years. 3 years transition to get to 75%. That means that starting the 1st of July of this year, 62.5% does not apply anymore, and now 66% applies to the rule regional content. This 66% is a staged increase towards the 75% that we are going to in 3 years. That is the major difference regarding the regional content of the vehicle. But the USMCA has 3 more components that the NAFTA didn't have, and you have to be aware of these. There are essential parts or core parts that were selected, and I put them here. You can see engines, transmission, suspension, steering systems, body, chassis, and the axles have a new regional content rule that was not in place during the NAFTA. It also has to go to 75% in 3 years. And for electric or hybrid plug-in vehicles, the advanced batteries that they use are also part of these core parts. The core parts have to get to 75% on average. That means some of these components may be lower or higher, but 75% is the new threshold that we will be arriving to over the next 3 years. Corporates, OEMs in North America, have to purchase 70% of their steel in North America and 70% of the purchases of aluminum, also from North America. What I mean by North American corporate is the OEMs in Mexico of X brand in Mexico, plus that OEM in the United States, plus that same OEM in Canada, together, they have to arrive to the 70% purchase of steel in North America, and the same for aluminum, 70%. This 70% does not have transition. That means that they have to arrive to this number starting the 1st of July. Purchases of suppliers of steel and aluminum does not count towards this 70%. It has to be purchases from the OEMs. This is a very, very tough new component of the rule that the OEMs have to comply. And finally, a rule that also did not exist in the NAFTA and that we have under the USMCA is what they call the labor value content. Labor value content is no other but places where the salary is $16 per hour. This is just another way to say US and Canada. So 25% that increases to 40% in 3 years will apply for vehicles, for light vehicles, meaning that 25% of the vehicle has to come from parts and components from the US and Canada, growing to 40%. In this rule, the purchases of the tier ones do apply towards these percentages. That means that if an OEM is buying from a tier one in Querétaro, but that tier one in Querétaro is buying from a tier two in the United States or Canada, those purchases that they make in the United States and Canada from tier twos will count towards the percentage that the OEM has to comply with. In the case of the pickup trucks or the commercial vehicles, these percentages are 30% since July 1st, increasing to 45%. You can see that the rule of origin is quite difficult, quite stringent, but there was a way out to this temporarily, a waiver to this tough rule that will apply at a model level according to the USMCA. The USMCA provides that the OEMs can negotiate at a model level with the authority of the importing party a new another rule that is not as tough as this one, a waiver to this rule temporarily. It will have to show the authority in the importing party, say an OEM in Mexico exporting to the United States, they will have to sit with the USTR to tell them how they will comply with this rule. They can start with a lighter, not a tough rule, but they will have to show them a plan, a credible plan on how they will finally arrive to this rule. Usually, it will be during this 3-year period, but they can extend to 2 more years. So to a total of 5 years, they will have to comply with this rule should they or if they negotiate this waiver to the rule with an alternative rule that has behind a plan, a credible plan of compliance. So many companies with specific models, they have done that, and the way they are receiving preference, even if they are not complying with the new rule, is because they negotiated the specific plan to be able to not to comply temporarily. So it is very important, these negotiations that have taken place and will be taking place with the authorities in the importing party. It is important to note that these rules of origin apply to the three countries. So the same for exports from the US to Mexico, or Canada to the United States or Mexico. It applies trilaterally. So it is, I think, very important for the audience to note that in their production, if you are a tier one, you have to uh, consider that if you are a supplier to an OEM, number four, this labor value content in your purchases from the United States and Canada will apply for the OEM towards their compliance of these percentages. Next, please, Franco. Well, I think we already talked about these and this new rule of origin. Of course, let me finalize, because my time is up, with two items. One, for Mexico, it is an opportunity. An opportunity because this new rule, as stringent as it is, will bring back suppliers from Europe and from Asia to North America. And Mexico is, of course, one place that will offer tremendous competitiveness. So it is an opportunity. It is a challenge because it is a tremendously stringent rule. And the pandemic will also bring back suppliers closer to North America. This, what I call deglobalization, this aim towards nearshoring versus the offshoring, this nearshoring movement that we will be experimenting in our industry will bring Mexico also an opportunity. So COVID-19, it is an opportunity, even though it has brought us a tremendous crisis, but the USMCA also, in the mid and long run, making the rule tougher and more stringent towards a higher North American percentage, brings also this opportunity of the nearshoring. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be, of course, quite attend to your questions. Please, Hector, take the stage. Here is my email. Should you need to contact me. Thank you again, Hector.
Okay, Eduardo, thank you very much for your very valuable presentation. With no doubt, very interesting. And yes, I mean, this pandemic, the COVID-19, have only, not only is putting us into be living very difficult times, but also has been educating us on some of the real weaknesses of the global supply chain. And now, as you are saying, it is a very big opportunity for us as a region, North America, to become stronger and start working on nearshoring versus offshoring. And before introducing our next speaker, I would like to invite all of our participants today to take our poll. These will be providing food for thought for our speakers during this webinar, and that will be very interesting for all to get the insights and the doubts and questions from you answered, so we can really be able to address all of those things that you are interested on. Okay, continue with this presentation now, it is a time for us, right? You can see that all on your screen. It is a time now for us and for me to be introducing our next speaker, okay? Alicia Mas. Alicia is a very experienced and has a very proven track record for leadership in global, multicultural, diverse environments, creating opportunities for stakeholders to achieve optimal solutions in very difficult and complex times and financial situations, right, as the ones that we are facing right now. And this pandemic has been also telling us the weakness of the supply chain when, for example, we were having suppliers far away, like in China, okay? Before we start seeing our facilities shut down here in America, some of our suppliers have been shutting down their operations because they were lacking components from China and all of that. And some of the companies are going into very, very difficult times when it comes to financial risks. And Alicia will be sharing with us the financial outlook for the supply base and some of the most important tools to use when we are going through these insolvency risks. So Alicia, thank you very much. And let's get all of that very valuable insight from you.
Thank you, Hector. I'm looking at the Seraph webinar poll on my machine, so I don't know if everybody else is looking at that right now, but I would also ask Franco to start my presentation. Thank you, Franco. I'm still seeing the Seraph webinar poll. I don't know if everybody else sees that. If we can move to the first page of the presentation. So we have 4 slides that I'll review with you today. Some you've already seen with Eduardo, and Eduardo is going to be a hard act to follow, as we say. He had so much interesting information. But what I wanted to talk to everybody about is to take the data, the SAR data, the vehicle production data, fleet information, and then liquidity challenges on the supply base caused by COVID-19, and discuss some of the things that suppliers can do to alleviate what has been a very difficult, I think, time period for them. So if we could go to the first schedule, the SAR data. Perfect, thank you. So what you see here, I've shown you a time series here from 2009 to 2019, and it shows the vehicles sold, millions of vehicles sold in the 3 regions. And you can see that we started back in 2009 fairly low, but as you go through all the way through the last 5 years leading up to 2019, we're in the 20 million unit range, and we're there for 5 years. And so importantly, what that means to the industry is that there's opportunity to put money into, rainy day funds, as we say. We learned a lot. I think the automotive industry learned a lot from the 2008, 2009 timeframe. And so as we entered into COVID, and if you could go to the next page, please. As we entered into COVID, what you found was that we had a reduction, starting in April and May, that was similar to what we had in 2009. But The other thing that we also have to recognize is that at the time that COVID-19 hit, that all of the economies were operating fairly strongly. So as we went into COVID-19, what you began to see is the OEMs and the large tier ones and tier twos, and then some of the smaller companies, there was already a lot of excess liquidity in the supply chain. And by that, I mean, there were undrawn lines of credit, there was cash on the balance sheet, and people were accessing that liquidity because at the time that we went into the shutdown, nobody really knew when we would be coming back up. But thankfully, we were down for only 8 weeks and we came back up sort of mid-May. However, as Eduardo pointed out, for Mexico, it was closer to the first week of June. And that actually had an impact across the entire North American region because, as Eduardo mentioned, Mexico plays a huge role in the automotive industry in the region. And so what you see out into the periods going forward, so in like November and December, we don't get back up to the $20 million unit level. We get more to the 16 million. And the question is, why is that? So what demand is actually deriving, the fact that we don't get back to the, to the 20 million level? If we can go to the next page, please, Franco. So this shows the production. So this is like the flip side of sales. What are we producing in North America? Because as Eduardo also pointed out, we have a lot of imports that come into our region. And the difference between the 16.4 that you see in 2026 and the 20 million is all the imports that we have from other countries. But you can see in 2020 how we're still producing at a lower level. And so the question is, where is the demand that we're not seeing? And part of that is answered by fleets. And if you go to the next page, what we find here is that there's a significant amount of vehicles that are sold to fleet purchasers. And the biggest fleet that is experiencing hardship right now is the rental fleet. And I think everybody has heard about the Hertz having to go into bankruptcy. Hertz is kind of interesting because along with like just a little bit of history, 2008, 2009, when GM and Chrysler at the time had to go into bankruptcy, they had, the US industry and by default, the other regional industries that we have had significant overcapacitation. That is one big difference between then and now. And that has a bearing on also liquidity. So in the 2008, 2009 timeframe, 2010, there was a lot of capacity that was taken out of the industry. And the capacity that we have today is, I would say, mostly needed by the OEMs. And so there's not a lot of situations where you have an insolvency and a supplier just ceases to be. That's not happening. If you have an insolvency, what usually occurs is that there is a sale process and the supplier continues on under new ownership. It's very different from what we had leading up to the 2008, 2009 timeframe. But that's sort of similar to what you see that happened with Hertz. Hertz was already having significant difficulty. And so COVID-19 simply pushed it over the edge. And you're going to see that in a lot of other industries, for example, retail. So you will see a lot of retailers just basically falling off the cliff and filing bankruptcy. Very, very different in the sense that these industries have had difficulties leading up to COVID-19, and COVID-19 has essentially pushed them over. So in this case, when you look at fleet sales and you look at rental fleet, you can see this is May 19 over May 20. And there's like a 91.3% decline in rental fleet. Now, all of that is sort of related to the fact that the travel industry is just totally flat on its back and is subject to probably getting a lot of government support, particularly airlines. And so that fleet sales account for roughly 17% of the US sales. And going back to my comment as to why you won't see us producing at the 16 million level unit yet is because of things like the fleets and not knowing when they're going to fully come back to the levels that they were pre-COVID. So moving into the next spreadsheet, we did an analysis at Glass-Ratner. We wanted to have an understanding of the potential liquidity impact of COVID-19 on the supply base. You know, when we initially started into the shutdowns, there was a lot of estimates running around that there was going to be $20 billion needs for the supply base or $50 billion needs for the automotive industry in total. And so what we wanted to do is take a snapshot of, we had to use public database, and we did. In this slide, what you will see is there are approximately, in this data set, 100 public suppliers. And it was actually taken for a much larger supply set of 600. The 100 ended up being those suppliers that had liquidity issues. And so then what we did was we layered in some assumptions. And those assumptions were, you know, we were going to be shut down for 2 months, and then we were going to come back up. And when we were going to come back up, we were going to come back at, you know, a much slower launch rate, like, for example, 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%. And so what you see here in this chart, we call it a smiley chart, is during the shutdown is where you would have expected a lot of the liquidity issues for those suppliers that didn't have access to liquidity. As I mentioned at the front end of the discussion, there were a lot of suppliers that had access to liquidity. And then there are some suppliers that don't have access to liquidity. And those are the ones that you see in this chart. And so what we show here is that during the shutdown, there would be a need for liquidity. But what we didn't really account for is the fact that during this shutdown, there were government programs that helped alleviate, I would say, the first section of this chart. And so the height of the charts tell you that, and we use just the base case, the yellow, would say of these 100 insolvent suppliers, they would need $2.2 billion. And then you see it go down, and it goes down because during this time, if you think about it, suppliers have inventory on hand. And if they're going to be producing at lower levels, they won't need to buy as much inventory. And they're also having the help of working with vendors, working with customers, and working with lenders, in addition to working with their government programs. So you see during the summer months, which is where we are right now, all of those, I would say, constituents are helping the supply base get through what might otherwise be a tight liquidity standpoint. But as you see, liquidity gets tight as you go out towards the end of the year, in particular, if the rate of production is still somewhat less than where we started. So here we assumed we were at 40 to 50 and we ended up the year at 70. And so the effect accumulates that you're not able to produce at those levels that you're able to actually make money. So this what helped us understand that, number one, it wasn't going to be a 20 to $50 billion number. That was going to be something far less. And that it was also going to relate to those suppliers that are already having difficulties. So what I'd like to talk about now in my last couple of minutes here, because I have about 2 or 3 minutes, are what are the things that suppliers should be doing. And it doesn't matter if you have great liquidity or you don't have great liquidity. It's most important, though, if you don't have great liquidity, is you want to be very disciplined about understanding your liquidity. And there is a standard in the industry where you do a 13-week cash flow. You update it every week for actuals to make sure that your actuals are close to your forecast. You want to have as much forecast accuracy as you can have, and that you just roll it forward. And this is really important because it gives you 90-day outlook, and you'll be able to implement actions in those 90 days to help you manage your liquidity. So once you do that, then you have to say if there is you don't want to be surprised, right? We don't like bad surprises. And in these situations, good surprises generally don't happen. And so what you want to be able to do is be prepared for bad news, because then you will definitely need to go to your constituents for help. And it can be going to your customers for maybe a short-term type of accelerated payment terms. It's going to your vendors and asking them perhaps if they would take a payment plan. It's going to your lenders and asking them if they might defer principal payments for a period of time. So there's all different constituents inside your liquidity plan who can help you. And then as you go through that, it's always really important to make sure that you've managed your costs to the lowest level that you can. And once you've done that, to make sure that your pricing is adequate. And then if you go to your shop floor, to make sure that your shop floor is actually operating as efficiently as possible. And we'll have more about that from our Seraph team. But those are the key things that are really important, and a very highly disciplined approach during these times of uncertainty that can help you at least sleep at night, knowing that you're going to have cash to run your business, and be able to follow up with all the proper constituents that you'll be working with. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to Hector. And thank you very much for your attention, and look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Okay, Alicia, thank you very, very much. This great presentation that you have shared with us along with Eduardo's is giving us very, very good information in order to increase our awareness. And, you know, if we have greater awareness, we can be able to have better alternatives, and we can be able to make better decisions as a consequence. And now it is the time for me to introduce our next speaker, Jan Griffiths. Jan will be talking us and will be introducing us into a very, very important topic in these difficult times that we are facing, which is leadership. Leadership through change. I mean, during the past few months, we have been living unprecedented times of change and disruption, we can say. And Jan will be giving and sharing with us some breakdown of the key strategies that can certainly help automotive companies thrive into the chaos. Jan is the president and founder of Gravitas Detroit, a company that is committed to developing the leaders of the future by providing workshops and coaching to build high-performance teams. Jan moved when she was very young, at the age of 23, to the US. She quickly made her mark and rose through the corporate ranks. And ultimately, she was serving as Chief Procurement Officer for a global automotive Tier 1 supplier. Her success in the position helped Jan to earn a spot on Automotive News list as the 100 leading women in the North American industry. And also, Jan will be sharing with us not only the financial or technical side of the leadership, as we have been doing so far, but also there is a very important part, and that is the emotional side of managing a complex process in these recession economic conditions. So thank you very much, Jan, for being here with us today, and let's listen to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jan, and I believe in authentic leadership. And you know what that is. It's that boss you either have or once had that has your back, the one that believes in you, the one that you love to work for. There's trust, there's transparency, there's honesty. They support you no matter what you do. Even if you make a mistake, they're right there with you. You like to work for them. And yes, they're nice. Imagine that in automotive leadership. That's authentic leadership. Times of crisis are the perfect times for authentic leadership to rise up and shine. There's no better time, because during a time of crisis, it is so critical that leaders connect at a very deep human level with their teams. This is not to be considered weak in any way, shape, or form. This is a strength of a truly great leader. Weak leaders in times of crisis fail, and we know it, and we have seen it. But what does this mean, a time of crisis? Yes, of course, the pandemic that we're in right now is a time of crisis. But a crisis scenario means that things are moving really, really fast. Things are coming at us left and right. It's a tremendous time of uncertainty. And we have to make decisions, and we have to make them quickly. And we're often not sure which direction to go in. That's a crisis. And what happens to people, to human beings in a crisis? We go back to our primal state of being. And that means we move into either fight or flight mode. We either run into it aggressively or run away from it. That's how our brains are programmed. Or even worse, we freeze. And we've all been through some sense of that. It's only normal and natural. And it takes a great, authentic leader to be able to help people through this and move them forward. We've all been through some form of the grief cycle. And what I mean by that is we've gone through this period of denial. Oh, this can't be happening. This isn't happening to me. Then the anger, the sadness, then some sort of form of a sense of loss. It is a grief cycle. We have lost our lives as we once knew them to be, and certainly our work life. We're now in this period of acceptance, and we're starting to understand what this new normal thing is all about. It takes a leader with the right mindset to, first of all, get themselves through that grief cycle before they can get their teams and their business through that cycle. It's important for the leader to get their head in the right place first. And I believe that COVID-19 is the greatest opportunity we will have in our lifetime to step up and show authentic leadership at its best. We have a choice. We can either go into some sort of victim mode and some sort of denial phase and pretend it isn't happening, or we can grab a hold of this and embrace it and deal with it head on. And that's what authentic leaders have been doing. I know this is nothing new to the audience. 5 things that are important in leading through crisis. First of all, it's bringing calm to the chaos. Great leaders know how to do this. And it's not just in the words they speak, it's in their body language, it's in the tone that they use. But more importantly, it's about making that human connection with their teams, scheduling more one-on-ones. I know we're all zoomed out, but the one thing that was so easy to push off of our corporate agenda in the past, and that is those one-on-one meetings, during this time of crisis, I'm sure you've all found you have to bring them back. It's keeping that team connected, understanding their very basic needs. We were shaken to our core. The fabric of reality, of normality, was ripped apart. We didn't know if we were going to be able to buy toilet paper, if we were going to be able to feed our families. Our very basic needs were being threatened. A great leader understands that and connects with people on this very basic level first, before you can even begin to talk about work performance. It's been a time to drop the corporate mask. So we have this image that we like to present to our team and to the company and to the world. And I've seen it, particularly at more senior levels. You see the corporate VP that's very buttoned up on the conference calls, on the Zoom calls. And then the pandemic hit, and guess what? We saw them with dogs jumping up on their laps and their 2-year-old running into the room. We saw them as a human being. Times of crisis, a leader has to be first and foremost human, and number 1, bring calm to the chaos. Number 2, get that war room structure in place quickly. The bureaucracy and the way of decision-making that we once had in the business is null and void. Forget it. Throw out the rule book. It's time for a war room approach. There needs to be a structure. As a leader, you have to be engaged and have a direct line of sight to the front line for the action, but not so much so that you're making all the decisions. And that's a very difficult balance to empower the team. And teams have to be more empowered in a crisis situation because you just don't have the time. You're moving so fast. So managing that empowerment, staying engaged, but not taking on every decision, and making sure that delegation is in the right place. Number 3, paint a positive picture. This has been hard for leaders to do during a pandemic, but there has to be this bone deep commitment by the leader that we will get through this. And the leaders, the authentic leaders that have been able to show their teams and their businesses that commitment through this pandemic are the ones that will bind team members to them. Showing vulnerability. So showing that they are indeed human and they don't know what the future is going to be, but again, knowing that they have this bone deep commitment that we will get through it together. Number 4, communicate. Communicate, communicate, communicate. We're not going to have all the answers. Even where we're at today, we're months into the pandemic. It's okay that we don't have the answers. And in automotive, we like to have the answers. And we like to present to our businesses and to our teams that we know who we are and what we're talking about. And normally we've got a playbook for that. Anything that happens in automotive, for the most part, most of us have been in it for years. We've been there before. We've dealt with that supplier that's run out of cash. We've dealt with labor issues, equipment issues, customer issues, you name it. We've all been there before. But there's no playbook to follow for this crisis and this pandemic. And being open and saying that is important to show your humanness and your vulnerability. It shows more strength and courage to do that than it does to say that there's a plan and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, because you just don't know. So sharing that with the team and just communicating to the team that we're going to get through this together, and as information unfolds, to share that. Alicia mentioned in her presentation, she's talking about cash and managing cash. And something that's very near and dear to my heart with my supply chain background is dealing with suppliers. And this is where I see a lot of companies really fail. Yes, you can go out there and negotiate with the suppliers on payment plans. It can happen. I've done it many, many times. But it takes great leadership to be able to put that script together, to tell the story, to have that conversation with all of your stakeholders, specifically suppliers, to get them to buy into what's happening with your business and support you. The buyers and the materials people on the front lines typically, in many cases are not equipped to have those conversations. So it takes great leadership to help them and support them and help them write a script to get through those conversations. And then the escalation process. What does escalation look like? It's about communicate. There's nothing worse from a supplier perspective when there's a problem and they don't hear from the customer. So please keep that in mind. And then number 5 is take action. Take an action. Don't freeze and don't wait until you've got all the information, because you're not going to have it. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be in a situation with a crisis where you're going to have all the information that perhaps you've been used to having in the past. So make a decision. If the action is wrong, if you take a step left and you should have gone right, it's okay. Admit it to yourself and the team. They will respect that, and it will bind them to you closer and tighter than ever before. But all of this you already know, because we've been in this for months. And if you didn't know this at the beginning, you've certainly learned it over the last several months. But the exciting part is this: where do we go from here? And I agree with Eduardo. This is a great time of opportunity. What is this new normal that we talk about? We talk about this thing called this new normal, but yet, you know what? There's no real definition for it. And that's great, because we get to define it ourselves. We get to look at everything that we've learned during this crisis and decide what we want to keep for the new normal and what we want to throw away. I've heard stories from clients about them making decisions and following processes in record time, a process that would maybe take 15 steps, they're now learning to do in 5. People are using technology like never before. Zoom is a classic example. Things like shared drives for documents. I spoke to a major OEM the other day. They said, finally, I got somebody to use the shared drive so that we can all have the same access to the same technology. So there's so many advantages and things that we've experienced during this pandemic. We have to harness them. We have to take a hold of them and make sure that we take them into this new normal as we form this new reality. Good news: after every crisis, there is massive transformation. The Black Death in Europe ended feudalism. That was a few years ago. After World War I, that changed women's rights significantly. After the Spanish flu, we hear a lot about that these days, came the Roaring 20s. Even after 9/11, the world changed dramatically. But there's massive transformation that happens after a crisis. And we can either sit back and let events unfold, or we can go at it and say, you know what? This is a great time for me to take a look at my company, my business, my team, redefine my mission. Where am I going? Eduardo is right. There's so much opportunity specifically for Mexico. Have you taken a moment to step back with your team and understand what that opportunity is and redefine your vision? The time is now to do this. We have an opportunity to build this strong foundation because we've been through this shared struggle together. And for examples of how this works, I look to Navy SEAL team leadership. If you look at the Navy SEALs, they go through what they call Hell Week. And that really separates, to use an old term, the men from the boys, as they say. And that's when the leaders, the true leaders, really shine. It is Hell Week to the Navy SEALs. For us, it's this pandemic. So How do we take some of these leadership pointers from the Navy SEALs and incorporate them into our business in automotive? The shared struggle is one. The other is contingency planning. And if you look at SEAL team leadership, they often talk about stress testing and stress inoculation. And in automotive, and I've been in it for many years, when we talk about contingency planning and risk mitigation strategies, I can already see and feel the eyes rolling to the back of your heads. And it's like, oh no, really? I'm sure there's a PowerPoint presentation or a document somewhere where we were forced to talk about that for some quality audit, right? But now it's real. Now we've used the word supply chain more than we've ever used in the last 3 decades. I've heard it in the last 3 months on the news and in social media. We have to develop contingency plans. We have to understand supply chain risk like never before. In SEAL team leadership, they use a process called the sand table, and they basically visualize a mission and what can happen, what can go right and what can go wrong. And we're having to do more of that. So contingency planning is with us right now, and it's part of our future. And it's good. It's not something we have to do. It's not an awful laborious task. It's something that could perhaps help us establish our vision for the future to take us forward into the new normal. And that could mean hard decisions. It could mean restructuring. It might mean focusing on a new product. Who knows? The future is yours to define. It is no one else's. This pandemic is an accelerator for workforce and workplace transformation. Are you going to see this as an opportunity, or are you going to sit back, play the victim, and just allow it to happen to you? I would suggest to you, this is your opportunity and the time is now. Thank you.
Okay, Jan, thank you. Thank you very much. I am sure that all of us and the audience also, we are reflecting about leadership and the big opportunities, of course, challenges that we have ahead and in front of us, but we certainly be taking advantage of these to make it a real success. So with that said, and in order to not be freeze or get into panic, but be turning things into action, and be talking about engage people and teams, empowering the teams and our employees and all of that, and landing through leadership, all of this information that today we have been getting from our panelists. Now we have Richard Payne. Richard Payne is an engagement manager at Seraph, and he is bringing to the table more than 25 years of leadership and expertise, not only in automotive, but also in some other manufacturing operations across the United States and Europe. He has been leading client efforts in restructuring, turnaround, operational improvement initiatives, and he is providing coaching and mentoring for high-level executives and plant operational leaders. Prior to joining Seraph, Richard held senior leadership positions at Continental Automotive, Siemens BDO, Faurecia, and North American Lining. And Richard will be telling us how we can land all of the concepts that we have been listening today, and how the Seraph team has supported the transfer of over 200 manufacturing lines without a single day of supply lost to our end customers. So he will be touching on the foundations of our MOVE methodology and best practices for leading through these consolidation and relocation opportunities and activities. Thank you, Richard, and let's listen to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hector. I appreciate the introduction. And thank you, Eduardo and Jan and Alicia, for very insightful and informative presentations. So there is no doubt that today we live in very challenging times. I mean, this is a common theme that we have heard through all the presentations thus far today. And we see that companies are faced more and more with the decision, or the subject rather, of rationalization. in terms of potentially relocating or consolidating their operations. However, I will subscribe to you that these decisions, although they're difficult decisions to make for sure, they don't have to represent gloom and doom. They don't have to represent despair. In fact, at Seraph, we encourage our clients to take a more opportunistic view. This is a common theme that you've heard throughout today as well. We look at this as an opportunity not only to optimize our processes and our lines and our procedures, but also to optimize our entire business and to optimize our footprint. So today, what I would like to do is bring two subjects before you, one of which Hector has referenced in his introduction, which is our MOVE methodology. This is a process that we have developed over many years, that we engage with clients to help ensure success when the decisions are taken to relocate or consolidate their operations. Secondly, also, I would like to cover with you the three keys to success. So out of the many, many years that we have done this and conducted engagements very successfully, there are two or three key components that I would like to present to you that you would find useful if you find yourself in this situation. So at Seraph, we have utilized this methodology for many, many years. It is a very robust, practical, and methodical tool. We have literally built this tool with over 100 years of experience from our consultants within our company. And again, we call this tool our MOVE methodology. And as Hector has mentioned also, we've utilized this to transfer over 250 lines. And of course, when you're transferring lines in an operation, there are always tools and jigs and fixtures, and we have successfully transferred thousands of those as well. And the important point to take away here is that we've done so and had zero disruptions or interruptions to the end use customer. So let's take a few minutes to review this process. Let me share my screen. So as you can see, the MOVE methodology is represented by four distinct and relevant phases. First of all, in the align phase. So in the align phase, what we're looking to accomplish there is, first of all, we have to have the right team and the right team composition. So during the alignment phase, we're looking to create a cohesive and aligned team. We're looking to create unification with a clear vision. So a clearly defined vision, clearly understanding where we're heading and why we're going there. And then we also have to be unified around the overall strategy to achieve our vision. The second phase is the planning phase. During this phase, we of course are developing a very detailed, very robust, a very meticulous plan that we will utilize to successfully make the relocation and the consolidations. Now, I will tell you that these two phases are extremely critical. If we do these right, we do these properly, then our chances for success go up exponentially. However, conversely, of course, if we do these incorrectly, then we have significant challenges and roadblocks to overcome to be able to achieve success. Then the third phase is the execution phase. So during this phase, we have, by this point in time, we have created the playbook. Now it's a matter of running and executing the plays properly. Now, I will say this, this was alluded to just by Jan just a few minutes ago. We also have to be agile in our execution of our plan. There will be things that come up that we did not account for, that we did not accommodate for in our plan. So we have to be able to pivot. And it's okay if that happens, but we have to be prepared mentally to make those changes when necessary. And the last phase, of course, is the close phase, or we could also term this the transition phase. This is a very important phase, although it is one of the shorter components of the 4 phases for sure. It is certainly not less important. We at Seraph always, when we engage with our clients, regardless of the challenges that we're facing, whether it's a crisis scenario or whether it's a move situation, we're always focused on leaving our clients with a sustainable situation, with a sustainable environment. The last thing that we want to do, of course, is exit, and then 2 to 3 months later, our client finds themselves back into a crisis situation. This is not our focus. Our objective is to make sure that when we leave a stable environment. So let's take a little bit deeper look into this methodology. You'll see in the 4 phases, there are some key components within each phase. And then also at the bottom, you'll notice that there are some key deliverables. All of these components are extremely important. And of course, the outcomes are extremely important. I won't go into each one into detail today because of our time, but I would like to focus a little more deeply on the planning phase, and you'll see the terminology there, work stream. And at the bottom, you'll see the deliverable of a process product work stream. So this is the terminology that we use when we are talking about developing a structure. So this is our structured approach in regards to making a successful relocation or consolidation. You'll see going horizontally that we have process work streams. These work streams are represented by all the key operational and functional areas that you typically find. And then vertically, you'll see the product work streams supporting that. So this matrix organization is something that's extremely important, and we have found to be extremely successful. In a few moments, we'll talk about how we structure our teams around this, but this is something, if you're not going to deploy a technique such as this, whatever structure that you do put into place, it certainly has to comprehend all of these elements. Now, as mentioned, over the years, we have transferred many lines and relocated many plants successfully. And out of that experience and out of those engagements, there are some keys to success that we would like to share with you here today. They are plan, plan, plan. That's repeated on purpose. Secondly, don't lose sight of the people. And third, make sure that we create a good team composition. So let's talk about each one of these individually. So first, in regards to planning, first of all, the 3 keys that I mentioned to you, the planning, the people, and the team composition. These 3 keys, I know initially they seem almost intuitive and may seem somewhat elementary, but I can assure you that each one of these have to be taken extremely seriously. To be successful, we have to have extreme discipline and commitment and ownership to these keys to success. We need to have rigorous follow-up and follow-through to ensure that our people are supported properly and the plan is executed perfectly. And then third, perseverance. We have to have perseverance if we're going to get through a difficult and a challenging situation. We have to persist through those obstacles that may come our way. So from a planning standpoint, I like to use an analogy a lot. I repeat this many times, but if we plan to fail, we are basically planning to fail. So let me repeat that one more time. If we fail to plan, we plan to fail. It's extremely important that we give this task the respect that it deserves and the attention that it deserves. So during the planning process, we want to plan for success. But however, we want to accommodate for those disruptions that may occur. And in our planning process, please take no assumptions, make no assumptions about anything. It is our duty to question everything, to make sure that our plan is as detailed as possible and that it accommodates as many of the potential risks or things that could possibly go wrong. Next, communicate. Jan said it earlier, communicate, communicate, communicate. Communication, I like to draw an analogy here, is like blood through the human body. So blood in our bodies, it brings us life. It flows. It brings oxygen and nutrients throughout our body. Communication in an organization is the same thing. It brings life, it brings nutrients, it brings information throughout our organization. Blood also does another thing. It takes away waste from our bloodstream. In the same way, communication does the exact same in an organization. We all know that during times of crisis and difficulties, that there are rumors that are created from time to time that had to be dispelled. And communication is the only way that we do that. So when the blood stops flowing in the human body, then we expire. When the communication stops flowing in an organization, in a project, we also expire. So communication is very important. We also want to take an opportunity to optimize. When at all possible, before we make a transfer or relocation, we want to make sure that we're optimizing our processes, that we're focusing on removing waste from our processes. Once we do that, once we can stabilize the lines and the processes, then it makes the transition much more effective. It allows us to take advantage and to optimize the results for our total business. Next, we want to make sure that we follow the plan. The plan is not just a suggestion. It's something that needs to be followed with rigor and with discipline and with perseverance. And remember, a goal or objective without a plan is nothing more than just good intentions. The second part, and I believe I have a few minutes left, so I'll move a little bit quickly, but the people element of what we're talking about is so vitally important. Making a move and making a transfer is not about just the products and the processes, it's about our people. It is so important that we don't lose sight of that. We have to have the same passion around taking care of our people, especially in a very difficult time such as this, as we would about the hard side of the business in terms of relocating the products and the lines. You know, I tell people that, you know, when we're dealing with a plant that we're relocating, let's assume for a moment that that plant has 500 people. Well, really the 500 people in terms of the lives that you're influencing, yes, it's the 500, but it's also you're influencing the lives of the families of those 500 people. And if we assume for a moment that there's 4 people represented by each employee, then we're literally talking about 2,000 people. This in and of itself should be a humbling element of what we're doing and what we're undertaking. So we have to make sure that we're focusing on that with extreme passion, with empathy, because it is a very difficult time and it's a difficult process that we follow through, but it can be something that, again, we turn into an opportunity to develop our people, an opportunity to engage our people, to make sure that they're a part of the process. Extremely important. Also, the transfer of tribal knowledge. Obviously, as leaders, as managers, we all focus on making sure that our systems are standardized and what have you. But if we're all honest with one another, we know that there are always those individuals in our operations that have knowledge that no one else has. And if we're going to be successful in our transfer, we have to make sure that we focus on that knowledge just as much as as those standards, processes, and procedures that we have. In addition to the people knowledge transfer and our focus on our people, we have to have a good team composition, a team that's built and composed around the matrix structure that I represented to you before. It needs to be complementary to whatever your structure and whatever strategy you have designed to successfully execute your relocation and your consolidation. Not only does the structure have to be composed in a very thoughtful manner to make sure it's complementary, but we also have to have a good leader in place. And the leader has to be more than just a project manager. A leader has to be a leader of people, someone that can inspire and can motivate their people and their teams to higher levels of success. Because recall, again, most of the time we're seen as having winners in this situation and people who view themselves as losers in this situation. And a good leader's got to bring all of that together and unify these teams. It's also equally important that when you develop your teams, that you have a team that represents the sending site and a team that represents the receiving site. These two teams, although they're somewhat separate, they have to work in unity with one another. Now, the sending site is typically seen as the lead in the process, but that's not always the case. But one point I want to leave with you is that the receiving site cannot be passively sitting back. The receiving site has to pull on the process and to pull on the products. They have to be an active participant. So these are the three keys to success that I'd like to leave with you today in terms of relocation and consolidation. Again, we want to build a robust and a meticulous plan. Don't second guess your plan. Be confident in your purpose and in your process. Lead your people. Lead your people with confidence, with humility, and with empathy. And for sure, make sure that you design a team and entrust a team that will successfully complete the task. So thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate you joining us with this webinar. So Hector, I'll turn the mic back over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Certainly very interesting information regarding and related to our MOVE methodology. And then we are going into the Q&A session, but before jumping into that, which is the last part of our webinar today, I would like to share with you the results of our poll. So you can have the results fresh and you can have them in mind getting ready for our Q&A session. So the first question is, do you anticipate a consolidation and restructuring in your North America operations in the next 12 months? So 34% of the audience is saying yes, 38% is saying probably, and only for 14% is saying unlikely, same percentage as of no, okay? So, you know, this is something that we need to be aware in order to be able to make better decisions and have more alternatives. Second question, what is your company's current focusing? So pretty much the majority of the companies is conserving cash, which is one of the main topics today, and that was very well explained by Alicia. Launch new programs. This is really important because no matter that we are living difficult times, the industry, we need to keep moving. And this is something that we need to have very fresh all of the time. And invest in new capital to improve efficiency, 13% of the answers. Yeah, same as it comes together with the launch of new programs, and we need to continue investing in order to keep moving forward. Remember that there are big initiatives related to switching to electrical vehicles, hybrid vehicles, all of that. Then if we Training and developing the team, this is really, really important. I mean, we need to keep working with the workforce, getting them engaged and empowered in order to be able to execute our plans. Question number 3, have you and your leadership ever brought in a consulting company to support with improving cash or restructuring? 19%, almost 20%, they are saying yes, and they are open to receive this kind of help. And the majority, which is 29%, is saying yes, but there is no interest in doing it now. And this is a very interesting answer. And, you know, we need to be aware of how we can keep the ball rolling in this very difficult time. And 52%, which is the majority, is saying no. And, you know, we need to keep sharing the value that we can add to those companies. Question number 4, do you trust your customers' projection? Yes, I mean, this is very, very important because as we were saying, we need to increase our awareness in order to drive better decisions. And no, 39%, which is, I mean, kind of logical because at the end of the day, you know, forecasts and projections are only that, but we need to be keeping a close eye into the numbers in order to be very well aware. Is your organization prepared for a long recovery or still hoping for a quick recovery? Long recovery is 70%, which is the majority, and only 30% for a quick recovery. Again, the numbers that Eduardo shared with us today and also Alicia are indicating that we will be on the long recovery side of it. But, you know, with these very uncertain times, and the only certain thing is the uncertainty, so we need to be keeping an eye on that as well. At what capacity are your facilities operating at this point in time? So 50% is responding, 38% of the audience is responding 50%. Yeah, we are seeing the increase little by little. Probably in the next coming weeks, we can be switching to the 70, 75 type of it. And we only have 14% which is already running at 100% of our full capacity. So with that said, let's move on with our Q&A session. And for the Q&A session, we have a question for you, Eduardo, okay? And this question is coming from Horacio Chavez, which is the Kia Motors CEO. And the question is there a known percentage of tier 1 companies in Mexico that apply to the waiver that you just mentioned?
Let me answer this. Give me 1 second. Tier 1s specifically cannot apply to this alternative regime of this temporary waiver of the rule. If we remember, the 75% during a 3-year transition period of the regional value content of the vehicle applies to the OEM. The 75% of the core parts, the OEM can make use of the average, but the suppliers themselves do not apply to this alternative regime. The one who applies to the alternative regime is the OEM. Now, the OEM can say, for example, I will not be able to arrive to the 75% regional value content number for the core parts because I need some time for the axles or for the engines or for the transmissions or suspensions. So is the OEM that sits with the importing authority and explains to them how they plan to comply during a period that is up to 5 years. for this waiver. It's not the tier one, it's the OEM that sits and tell the authority that in the core parts, they may not be able to comply. And they have to say how they will comply. So to answer the questions, no, there is not a known percentage of tier one. The tier ones cannot make use of these by themselves. It's the OEMs that make use of it and that negotiates whatever time period they need. You have your mute, Hector.
Yeah, sorry for that. Thank you very much, Eduardo. Another question, which is related to the one that you already answered, is what happens if a supplier, probably an OEM, does not meet the rule of origin when it comes to exports to the USA? Are they going to be paying duties?
Well, as I explained, the OEMs in specific models that they will not be able to comply with the new USMCA rule, then they have to make use of this clause within the USMCA that allows them for this waiver. It's called the alternative regime for the rule of origin. It's a waiver that will give them up to 5 years to comply, and they have to show a credible plan on how they will meet the rule of origin, either for the 75% regional value content of the vehicle, for the 75% of the core parts, the 70% of purchases for steel and aluminum, or these percentage that they have to meet of parts and components that come from Canada and the United States in the case of Mexican production. Either of these four, they have to sit with the importing authority in order to get the preference temporarily with this new alternative regime. After the time period elapses, there's no waiver and they have to comply fully with the new rule. But again, it's not the tier one that sits with the authority of the importing party, but rather the OEM.
Okay, thank you very much, Eduardo. Let's switch, and we have a question for Jan. The question for you is, how is coaching practice relevant or should be relevant to the automotive industry companies to cope and thrive amidst pandemic time?
Great question. So first and foremost, it's about supporting and helping leadership and teams get through this process and keeping them together. It's providing that additional help and support that they need to get through this. And then the secondary part of it is to help teams stand back and put together their vision for the future, for defining the new normal. A lot of teams are not used to doing that, to stand back from day-to-day operations and figuring out how to do that. Coaching plays a big part and a big role in making that happen.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jan. Another question, which is very interesting, and I think Richard and Alicia, you guys can help us. The question is, what is the outlook concerning the industry consolidation when it comes to mergers and acquisitions?
There we go. Sorry about that. That's actually a very good question, and it's a complicated question. I think that you will actually see more consolidation during this period. And the reason I say that is there will, as we mentioned during my section, the capacity that is out there is actually needed capacity, even though we're at lower levels today. We're ultimately going to get back to where we were, and the capacity is needed. So it can't be taken out of the industry at this point. So I think what you'll see is consolidation amongst maybe the companies that were not in a strong enough position to weather the COVID-19 impacts during the shutdown and during the relaunch, et cetera, that those companies will most likely end up being for sale and being purchased. So, and there's also inside the automotive industry, and this is always true, where there are, strategic plays. And that I think will continue during this time because, again, there are many suppliers who are quite strong and will take this opportunity. I think what Jan said, take the bull by the horns, because you can see opportunity inside the pandemic to grow your business, because we're not always going to be inside the pandemic. There is going to be light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think those two things, people that were not as strong going into COVID, but yet we need the capacity, those are going to be subject to consolidation. And then there's just going to be opportunistic consolidation. So I see it as a time where consolidation will be, I think, there will be very strong M&A activity. Maybe not right now, this very moment, but as we come out, people are going to start to think about strategically where they want their companies to be.
Yeah, I agree. I'll just add one comment to that. When you look back in 08 and 09, you had the significant financial pressures, obviously, but interesting enough, today we're faced with not only your financial pressures, but also there's geographical pressures in terms of the supply chain and the location of the supply chain. And of course, that is combined with the political pressures. So now you've got the political pressures, geographical pressures, and financial pressures all coming down, which I believe, as Alicia has alluded to, we will see more and more rationalization of the business and consolidation of the businesses. Much more than I think than we saw in 08 and 09, actually, believe it or not.
Okay, very good, Alicia and Richard. Question for you, Richard, and this is something that it is getting to my phone directly. The question is, does setup have any strategy or strategies or advice to suppliers regarding temporary idling or sharing of capacity to save cost until the demand recovers?
Can you repeat the last part, beginning with temporarily, please?
Yeah, suppliers regarding temporary idling or shuttering of capacity to save cost until the demand recovers.
Okay, yeah, sure. So if I understand the question correctly, let me repeat it to you. The question is, does Seraph have resources that can support the supply base while they're in the midst of idling capacity to continue to support their customers?
That is correct.
Okay. So from a Seraph standpoint, let me answer this holistically. So we have multiple businesses within our purview. Seraph is a strategic arm. Organizationally, obviously, we come in from a strategy standpoint and we can work with the supply base to help strategically develop a plan to not only improve and optimize your business during this difficult time, but of course, also to protect your clients and your customers. However, we also have a complementary company called Ops Onsite. Ops Onsite offers personnel at the shop floor level, frontline leadership, if you will, that can also come in and work with your organizations in a supplemental fashion to be able to maintain continuity of supply to your clients. So at that level, absolutely, we have the capability to come in and support the suppliers. And I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, but I'd like to know more, I guess, from the individual who asked the question. So Hector, if you can provide them with my email, I'll be glad to correspond with them.
Okay, very good, Richard. Yes, for sure. Question for Jan, and we will go through the last couple of questions. We need to be closing this in the next 5 minutes. We have many questions, which is very good. So for Jan, the question is, with the increased cost pressures, many suppliers will be forced into staff reductions. What steps can you or do you recommend for them to take the best to minimize the disruptive impact on their operations as they go through these difficult times?
Sorry, that's better, right? That's a good question. That's very specific, right? So I think that obviously you have to take a good hard look at your infrastructure and your operations and look at how you make decisions, how you made decisions before and during the pandemic, and really strip out all of that infrastructure that you no longer need, because we've learned a lot during this pandemic. We've learned what we can live with and what we can live without. And although these are very difficult decisions to make, I think when you stand back and strip the emotion out of it, even though I'm all about the emotion, but look at the business and what you absolutely need to run the business, then you can move forward. But you have to take that action and look at what you've learned during the pandemic in order to be able to move forward.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so people in the audience is asking for Richard's email. Okay, so Richard, can you provide your email address, please? Okay, so we are doing that, right?
I'm doing it now, yes.
Okay, very good. And let me go through yeah, we have it, is over there. Thank you, Richard, for that. And question for Eduardo and Jan is saying, how do you guys envision talent acquisition playing a key role in the reshoring in Mexico and USMCA or North America region?
You want me to answer, Alicia?
Why don't you go, Eduardo, and then I'll add some comments.
Okay, Jan, thank you. Well, absolutely. Talent has always been a key element for the auto industry development in our countries. Mexico is not an exemption. All of the companies that land in Mexico would always work together with the academic sector. Yes, Mexico has been able to meet the requirements of the industry, even in the midst of a good portion of investments going into the Bajío area, close to Guanajuato, Querétaro, San Luis, etc., where we have a tremendous demand for talent in this region. We were able to work with the academic sector and work out the needs for the talent that was needed. So my guess is that yes, is key, but the academic sector will be able to provide. And my recommendation is that when an investment is landing in any of the region and states of Mexico, that you get close to the academic sector immediately, so that right from the outset of your planning of investment in Mexico, you get the academic sector aware of your needs.
Yes, and I think talent acquisition is an issue wherever you go, right? There's no question about it. And it's up to the employer to present themselves as the employer of choice. So why would a given skill set or talent or person want to work for you? Who are you? What's your vision? What's your employer brand? What do you have to offer? And that starts with great leadership. So I would say great leadership and working on your employer brand, understanding what it is and how you get it out there, how your face is presented out there to the world will be a major factor in determining how you're able to attract and retain talent.
Okay, very good, Jan and Eduardo. And that is the final question. The other one that I want to address is some people in the audience is asking if the presentation is going to be available or shared with the participants. The answer for that is yes. It is going to be shared tomorrow, right? So wait for that. You will have it, no problem. And with that said, well, let's close up our webinar today. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Richard. Thank you to the Mexico Automotive Review team. We are very happy to share with you all of these very valuable insights. And of course, you will be getting our contact information so we can keep in close touch in the next times, okay? Here you have over there my email. And of course, we will be sharing in the presentations tomorrow the rest of the panelists' email so we can stay in touch. Thank you very much. Have a great day and stay in touch.